So today we have another guest, Ace Chapman. This is someone that I've met about 2 years ago. We actually did a collaborative video on YouTube where we were just discussing all things private equity and acquiring businesses for those of you who aren't quite familiar with the space. Since then, the relationship has matured, and now that we're both in Medellin, we finally had the time to sit down and talk about what brought him here to Medellin, Colombia. Just to give you a little background on Ace, he's lived in multiple countries. By profession, he is an investor, heads private equity firms, and what's interesting about what he does is that he actually helps others get into the private equity space, teaching them how to buy businesses and earn cash flow from their businesses rather than starting businesses. And you have a whole philosophy on that. He's originally from Tennessee, United States, and he's just another crazy person, crazy enough to pick up his life and take it to another country. So Ace, thank you for taking time out to meet with us today. And I really want to get into your story. So the first thing that I want to ask you is what was it that actually triggered you to say, you know what, maybe I want to live in a country outside the United States?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me. It's really cool to come here to see your offices and just be able to do something in person. I've done podcast interviews. It's been rare that I get to do one in person, and this is probably the first one since the pandemic and all that. So really, really excited to be here. So for me, going back, my journey abroad started a little bit more than a decade ago. At that point, I was buying and selling businesses similar to my career right now. Everything was offline, and I just had a lot of stress. And people say that they have stress, but I actually went to the doctor because I was getting hives. So I'm like 28, 29 years old, and I go to the doctor. And I'm like, hey, I need some kind of cream. I need something to get rid of these hives, man. Like, I'm looking crazy with this stuff on my face. Yeah. And, he kind of goes through, do some different tests, that kind of thing, and comes back. I go back a week later. I'm like, all right, so what do I need to take? Like, what can I do? He's like, you need a vacation. It's like, you just need less stress. I was like, okay, well, I'll get to the less stress thing, but what can I do in the meantime? Because I got these hives on my face. And that was like the realization. It's like, once the doctor is prescribing you a vacation, that was the first sign that there was an issue. And then, I was dating a girl at that time. And so it's like, all right, we're going to go on a vacation. We go on a vacation. And, in the airport, I'm getting calls from a couple of businesses. Then, we get there and I tell her like, hey, you go out this morning and do what you want to do. I'm gonna take care of some things. Then we'll have lunch together. And then the rest of the time, it's just vacation. She comes back, like as she's coming in, the person from the front desk is like bringing up paperwork that I had her print out. And she walks in, she's like, what are you doing? There's like papers everywhere. It's like, you've turned this into your office. Like, this is a big issue. And so it took those series of events for me to realize, okay, I really need to redesign my life. And so what I realized was that my whole life had been designed around my goals. And so they were very external goals. Like, okay, I want to be generating this amount of money and, I'd love to have this car. I'd love to have this house. And I had all of those things, it was an outrageous thing. It was like, oh, multiple cars for somebody that doesn't have kids, that just doesn't have a reason for any of this stuff. And so I realized at that point, it's like, I hadn't really decided like, what do I want my life to look like? Like, what do I want my day to day? What do I want to do when I wake up in the morning? What do I want to do, as I'm going to sleep at night? Like, what is that lifestyle design? And that became like something that I just sat back and really got into it myself to decide, all right, what is this life that I really want? I realized, hey, I don't really want these cars. It's a headache and there are maintenance issues. And like, I don't want to need this big house. Like, it was just really getting down into, I had let society tell me, here's what is going to make you happy, instead of really digging into myself and doing the work. Because it's like a process of, going through and eliminating, like, what don't I want? What do I enjoy? Testing different things, same way you would in a business. And so going through that whole process of getting in tune with what I wanted, and then it just became a lot of work. because I realized, I had 8 businesses at that point.
So at that point, you were acquiring businesses for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't. So did you ever work in like the traditional investment banking, private equity space, or you always started out as, hey, I want to go into this independently? Because I know the story of a lot of people who start out in investment banking is kind of the same. They're overworked, underpaid, hoping to make a nice nut, and then they go out on their own. So that wasn't the path that you took.
No. So I ended up buying businesses when it started when I was in college. I was using a software called Cool Wall Street, which is just this online game basically about the stock market. And they were just terrible at running the business. So I reached out to them to be an intern. And, they wrote back and basically were like, hey, we've moved on to another business. We want to get rid of this business. Maybe if you find somebody to buy it, you can intern for them. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I'm going to find somebody to buy your business from you so that I can have a free job? Like, that does not sound like a good deal.
Yeah.
But I was curious about how much money they were making and, I was just curious to get an inside look into the business. So I'm like, oh yeah, as a 19-year-old kid, I come across people that buy businesses all the time. Send me all the info. And they did. They sent me the P&L. And that was my first introduction to the fact that you could buy an existing business that was making money and people were willing to sell that. I just never knew it.
You weren't studying finance. You weren't.
No.
Man, that's quite a.
It was like this little side thing. It was just a fun game that I enjoyed playing. I was studying political science. I was really involved in just, I was president of my class. I was involved in kind of state politics. I was going to school in New York. So I was like heavily involved in that path. And thank goodness that this deal sidetracked me. And so long story short, they were, the business was making $60,000. They were willing to sell it for $70,000. And I'm like, I didn't know anything about valuations, but I'm like, I'm going to a school where people are paying $140,000 for 4 years of college and they're getting out making $50,000. So this just seems like a good comparable. So that was my first deal. And I had $3,000 and ended up borrowing, getting some investors. They financed half of it, and I ended up buying that business. And it still wasn't the big transition for me happened about 3 years later. So I made a great return off of that business over 3 years, but then the dot-com crash happened, and I had left college to run this business. Here I was. Now I didn't have a business. I didn't have a degree. And I was fortunate enough that I had somebody that told me, hey, there's this other guy who does something like what you do and you should meet him. So he introduces us and I'm like, oh, like, yeah, he tells me that you do something like what I do. I bought this business. He's like, oh yeah, so what do you do? And he was like, I flip hospitals. And he had come from investment background. First of all, I was like, oh, we do nothing alike. Yeah. I don't come close to doing what you do. But he had come from that background. And so that was my introduction to just like, oh, this could be a thing. Maybe I can find, other businesses. And, that was the beginning of that journey where I ended up buying a lot of different businesses.
Really interesting. And I kind of want to take the conversation to something that you said a little bit earlier. You said that you were starting to accumulate stuff, right? Like status symbols. Where does that come from? Because to me, that seems like a very American way of measuring your success is house, car, general appearance. And it's what a lot of people kind of focus on. And most people tend to figure that out too late in life that's not satisfying, right?
Yeah.
Like either midlife crisis, they realize it, or when they're 6 years old and they look back and actually forgot to live life. How do you feel American culture kind of models that mentality that says that this is happiness? And how did you actually kind of deduct out what was really important to you?
I call it like a marketing funnel. For any of the audience that is familiar with like marketing or marketing funnels, what you're trying to do is warm people up over a long period of time to buy your product. And in America, there are few products that are just like the American life. And that's what they're from a very young age, you're basically in this marketing funnel, higher education, it's the most beautiful marketing funnel ever. They're starting you out in kindergarten and you're like, okay, this is the next step. This is the next goal. And this is the next goal. And you got to get these good grades. And nobody really even breaks it down. Okay, but let's go all the way back into what if I don't want a job? And so I don't really need a degree. And so I don't really, but they're putting you in this warming funnel where you're built in a way to become this consumer. And part of that consuming is, things like what we're seeing is there's a false narrative around higher education. Other parts is, the marketing of the American dream. The other parts are, diamonds are a girl best friend. And so you have all of these things that are just, at the foundation. Even for me, I had a business, so making six figures. But I dropped out. I was really in the state of trying to figure out whether I was going to drop out of college. And it was really a difficult thing. And, a funny story is my dad this is early on in the internet. This is like 2000, 2001. My dad just didn't understand the business. Didn't understand what was going on. And so I had some investors that wanted to invest. And I go to him, I'm like, hey, I got these investors who want to invest in the business, but they want me to quit college. And he's like, well, obviously you can't quit college. Why do they even want to invest in this business? It's not even making real money. I'm like, Dad, it's making money. It's like, it's making internet money. That's not real money. So my dad really was the original Bitcoin investor. Yeah. It's like, no, there's no such thing as internet money, Dad. It's real money. And at that point, I had a check from DoubleClick, which is a big part of what AdSense is now in AdWords. And so I'm showing him the check, and it was like maybe a $5,000 check. And I'm like, yeah, like this. He's like, so you've been getting these checks? What have you been doing with them? I'm like, I'm putting them in the bank. He's like, Ace, the name of the company is DoubleClick. Like, what you do with a mouse? Like, this is an obvious scam. Which at that point, it was like, DoubleClick, that doesn't even who would name their company that? Yeah, wow. So we drive to the bank. And, he goes up to the teller. He's like, my son's gotten involved in some kind of scam. These people off the internet are sending him these checks. I need you to check and just see what's going on. And she goes back, and even she's like, oh my God, yeah, like this check, it says DoubleClick. Like, that's not a real company. She goes to the back. Obviously, they tell this is like $500 million. There's like $500 million in this bank account. Yes, it's a real company. And she comes back out. It's like, no, it's a real company. And, my dad, who was just very big into education, we get in the car, and he looks at me and he's like, why in the world are you even thinking about going back to college? And that was kind of some of my permission to not go back. But even for me, it was still, even after he said like, yo, you should not be doing that, it was so ingrained that even though the logical part of my brain and even from an outsider point is like just logic, it's like, no, like you need to focus on this, like take advantage of this type. But it was still just like, no, like success. I'm in a top 20 university. Like I'm gonna let go of that. Like no, that is what success is. And so the answer to your question is, it's just ingrained from this whether it's society and it's a little bit of it is like multi-level marketing, where the people ahead of you, they were sold that these were the things, and so they sell it to you. Yeah, so
every single teacher fell into that pattern of it.
Exactly.
So why would they deviate from that?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And then what was it about that situation where you were having the hives, you went on vacation with your lady, and she's kind of pointing out, what are you doing? When did it kind of click that maybe this life isn't for me? Like obviously you're still interested in investing in companies and buying businesses.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the workflow that was really an issue for you. But what made you say maybe I should be outside of the United States?
The first step was that thing. It was like the plane ride home. I just remember I'm just like writing there like, how do I change my life? Like how do I get out of this stuff and just start with a clean slate so that I can even have the space to figure out what I want. And so that was my goal at that point. And so the first step was like selling all of the businesses, getting rid of those, had 30 units of real estate, just like, okay, I'm going to just sell everything, cars, everything, and start from scratch. And so after that, I started to rediscover my interest in kind of internet businesses. And there was no clear thing of like, oh, I want to go overseas. But I came across a company called Empire Flippers. And this is like over a decade ago. It's just really cool because we still do. I was just with them in Thailand. But we ended up, I ended up talking to them and I was like, okay, I want to buy a business, but I do want more freedom. So I'm going to buy an internet business like I did. I stopped. After that one failed, that was another part of it. So that internet business failed. I was like, oh my God, this internet thing is crap. I just wrote off the internet. So I was doing offline deals. So then I was like, man, like I had a lot of freedom when I owned that business. And so they were brokers and kind of doing these things with internet businesses, really focused on assets at that point. So I reached out to them, connected with them. They had businesses for sale, but I'm like, this is kind of sketchy. I don't know if this is, real or not. So I'm going to go visit them. I need to meet them in person. So I asked, like, where y'all located? Could I come and meet you? Like, yeah, we're in the Philippines, in Manila. And I was like, that's far away, but you know what? And so it was really business. That was the first thing that just got me out of the U.S. I'd been to Costa Rica on an exchange program and loved it, but never really saw myself living there. Didn't see like other Americans that were there. It was like, oh, you're going to go there, you're going to come back. So this is the first time where I met people my age that just built a whole life overseas. And I got to see like how they were living and that kind of thing.
These were Americans
Yep.
who moved to the Philippines, had this business going. It wasn't a Filipino founded company.
No.
It was Americans. Okay. So then you got to see them kind of living life outside the United States, and it was like, wait, what's
exactly.
happening? Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. And that was the difference. When I went to Costa Rica, it's like, oh, we're going to go to the Costa Rica. And even my exchange sister, she came and stayed in the U.S. and went back. But yeah, this was the first time where I got to spend real time with Americans that just had built a life. And it was just exposure to this option. Just that, may have even heard of it, but just being able to dive head in, just understand like, oh, wow, like here you are living here.
What were the lifestyle differences that you noticed amongst that group that kind of made you say, this might feel right for me?
Yeah. So, one of the things, just being in a very aggressive business mode for most of my 20s, I don't think that I ever looked at business from the perspective of it could be laid back, enjoyable, and profitable.
And they were kind of living that way.
They were living that way. Where it was like, and again, some of the things that I'm saying now are a result of some of those experiences, but it was lifestyle first, which I still hadn't even thought of that. It was just like, okay, something has to change. So I'm getting rid of all of this stuff. I'm going to try to build, my little empire a different way. But that was that exposure, like, no, like lifestyle is first. Like my life is first, like how I live, like what I'm doing, me enjoying my hobbies and that kind of thing. Like that was first. The other thing was just the general lifestyle. So, having somebody that came in and cooked. I back then, it's so funny. I was speaking at an event here recently, and it's hilarious, but it's really true. Somebody at the event was like, I found some old photos and videos from you for like 10 years ago. And it's weird. Like it says it was 10 years ago, but you look so much older. Wow. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, what? Like we're kind of joking about it. We're at a dinner after the speech. And, I'm like giving her a hard time. It's like, man, are you trying to say I look old? And so she like goes on her phone and like pulls it up and like, no, look at this. Like, it's crazy. How about, and she's like showing the other people. And I look at it, I'm like, yeah, like it wasn't until that moment that I even realized like, wow, like I've actually look like I'm younger now than 10 years ago.
Yeah. Lifestyle change.
Yeah, which was all based on that kind of the lifestyle I was living back then versus like what the course of those 10 years. So that was my first exposure to just the idea of living overseas.
So from that experience, you decided, okay, Philippines looks like an interesting place. How did you actually transition your life from being in the United States, living the way that you were, kind of a victim of consumerism to unpacking all of that and moving to the Philippines?
Yeah. So it was definitely a series of steps. I had to take baby steps. My first thing was moving to the West Coast. So I ended up splitting time between Encinitas and San Diego, which I loved and had somebody I was doing business with. And being a little bit on the West Coast, maybe a little closer to Asia, so I could spend time going back and forth, and got to know a lot of Southeast Asia, from the Philippines to Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Saigon. Just it was a awesome time, and so it was more about having that mobility of going back and forth and getting to know and getting to experience Southeast Asia. And then ended up living in a town that's now actually popular called Chiang Mai. In Thailand. Yeah. So that was that first step. So it's like a baby step of just, all right, I'm gonna do San Diego first, and get to know Southeast Asia, end up spending time in Chiang Mai, which was beautiful.
How much time were you in Chiang Mai for?
So that was home base for a little over a year. Okay. Yeah.
And you lived continuously there for a year,
Yeah.
or you were kind of like bouncing between countries to renew visas?
So just, pretty much for the last decade, I have moved around. I have been traveling. Like I have home bases. Okay. So I'll have like an apartment, so to give you the high level, since then I've had apartments that are like year-long leases in Thailand, Buenos Aires, here, Portugal. So it's been pretty spread out. But most of the time, I'm only in that country for a maximum of 6 months.
Gotcha.
A year.
You'll kind of utilize the travel visa allowance, and then you'll bounce between either U.S. or another country and that home base for that 6 month time. Yeah. And so
very little in the U.S. So about a month for most of the last 10 years, I've been under the expat tax exclusion. So I will be in the U.S. for no more than a month, and then I'll be in those other places for the rest of that time.
Can you just explain the expat tax exclusion?
Yeah.
For myself, who doesn't know, and anybody else.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'm not sure how that's.
So basically, if you spend no more than I think 32 days in the U.S., I usually stay below 30, so there's no question. Then on the first $120,000 that you make, you basically pay a 5% tax.
Okay.
And so for me, it's like, all right, well, that's most of the time just my expense of wherever I'm living. So I'll have a home base, and that may be like you're living really amazing for $1,500, a couple thousand a month. And that on that first $120,000, you'd be paying $40,000 in tax anyways. Mm-hmm. So you're literally like living overseas for free. Like it's like, okay, I'm either going to give the government this money or I'm going to be able to live overseas. So that has been the last 10 years. This is the first year that I've actually broke that, just because there's a lot of opportunities in my space in the U.S. So I'm spending more time in the U.S. acquiring businesses.
So let me just be clear so I understand this properly. If you spend less than 32 days, so let's just call it less than 30 days in the U.S., then on your first $120,000 of earnings, you only have to pay an effective tax rate of 5%.
Exactly.
And as long as you're out of the country for that.
And you do need, there's other parts of it. So you want the income to be sourced, because so basically I have a company that's an overseas company, so it pays me that. Okay. So that, because let's say that you're an outsourced person, or not even outsourced, you're a remote worker from Google. They're gonna take their cut automatically.
Right out of your W-2.
Yeah. So the income still needs to be sourced with from a company. So if you're an entrepreneur, you can do it, because you can just create a company. The income comes to that company, and then your personal income comes to you from the overseas company.
Gotcha. So for anybody who's watching, I'm going to make this as clear as possible, right? So if you wanted to move out of the United States and you're entrepreneurial, you go to the new country, set up a business. Yeah. All your money flow, whether it's coming from the United States, from investments in the United States, the money flows from the U.S. to your international company. That international company pays you your living wage, and if it's under $120,000, and you've been out of the country for 11 of the months of the 12 months,
Yep.
you then are close, or that satisfies the qualification to pay a 5% effective tax rate back to the United States without having to kind of separate from your citizenship,
Yep.
without having to necessarily claim a new citizenship or residency. And on top of that, if you were concerned about overstaying your visa in one country, let's just say you decided to be between Colombia and Mexico, you would still be under their 6-month rule if you just bounce between those two places. So if you're looking for a template for how to do this, that's it. I didn't even know about that, and that's kind of good to know. And thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So it's really neat. So for me, I had never have gone through in Colombia, I had an investor visa. We talked about the hotel I invested in. So I had an investor visa for a couple of years, but then they stopped renewing those. So I haven't had that was the only visa I'd ever had. That was like a long-term visa. I've lived overseas, kind of using that, and only been in the U.S. 30 days a year without even having a visa in another country.
Awesome, man. That's pretty good to know. So what made you pick Medellin? You're here now, almost for that. This seems to be your home base from what I've seen. How'd you end up in Medellin?
Yeah. So same thing. I'm here about 6 months. A couple years ago, I was in Buenos Aires, and right before the pandemic and all of that, I think we got connected during the pandemic. So at that point, I was in Buenos Aires and loved it. It was beautiful. And people kept talking about Medellin. And it was interesting. Like, I had a friend that was just like really high on Medellin. And I'm like, man, I've just heard it's dangerous, and there's this problem and this issue and all these things. And it had been on my radar for years. I mean, it wasn't like that was the first time. It was just like, 5 years ago, people were like, oh, Medellin, and then, 4 and 3 and 2. And so it took a push for me to really start to spend time here. So before the pandemic, people were like getting out of Buenos Aires. Like it turned out to be true. They were very strict and just intense. They closed their border for like 2 years straight. Just a complete nightmare of a place. And before that, I had just come and visited for the first time to Medellin, and fell in love with the place and really enjoyed it, but had already made a commitment to that I had a lease in Buenos Aires. And so I'm like, all right, I got this lease, but Argentina is supposedly going to be crazy. Let me get out of here, get on one of the last flights before they just completely closed the border. It would have been a nightmare if I didn't get out, get to Medellin. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to stay in Medellin for a month and then, let things cool off, let things chill out, and then I'll get back. I think we all thought that there was going to be a very short-term thing. Mm-hmm. So I get here. I end up finding, Airbnb, whatever, and everything worked out magically. So I was stuck in Medellin, which is kind of the downside.
Okay.
But it was a great place to be stuck. It was way better than being stuck in Argentina. And over the course of that time, just really fell in love with it. And so it kind of forced that move. Like, I remember my very first trip, which was, I guess that would have been 2019, before COVID and all that. I got here and, I was out with a friend, we're hanging out, and, just spent the day here. I was like, oh man, yeah, I'm definitely gonna live here one day. And I was thinking like, oh, it'll be years from now, but there were other plans.
Cool. So the deal that you did here, you invested in a hotel, just because on this channel I talk about investing in real estate, and I'm starting to kind of look into purchasing boutique hotels. Can you walk me through how that deal was structured and what made you get drawn to that deal in particular?
That was one of the reasons that I ended up making that trip. So I had somebody who had done some investments here. They were talking about it from that. So my first time to Medellin wasn't just, oh, let me go and have fun. It was, oh, there's an investment opportunity. I'll go there and check it out. Because I still was just like, I didn't imagine that it was like this, just from what I had heard. So I come, meet with the people that are working on this project. It's a hotel here in the very touristy part of Medellin, Poblado. And, just the deal looked pretty cool. It was, an opportunity for me to invest in something that, I just from the amount of other people talking about Medellin, it's like, okay, I don't know if it's for me. I've heard it's dangerous, but everybody's talking about it. I think that this is probably going to be a good investment. Little did I know, again, that COVID was coming. So that was 2019. I made that investment. So all of that was really great too, because they were doing the investor visa. Now, a lot of that kind of canceled out, but I ended up going and making that investment and getting the investor visa.
What was the deal structure there? Was it pre-construction? Was it already erected? Was it change of ownership? What were the details of that deal?
So they had an investor that I was buying out. So the original investor was pre-construction, had some personal things come up that were, family. And so I was able, my background when it comes to acquisitions is I love motivated sellers. And so even if I'm just getting it at a slight discount, then, that's a win. And so, this person needed to sell. I had the cash, so I could get them the cash quickly. And so I bought out one of the investors in the hotel who needed that cash.
What percentage of that business?
I don't even know off the top of my head. It's single digits.
Okay.
So low single digits of the whole deal.
And have you exited that deal already, or are you still?
No. I'll probably, that'll be something that I'll hold for probably forever. I don't see myself.
Already,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I was really scared that it was gonna get slaughtered during COVID.
Yeah, I had a 6-unit Airbnb on Torrenza and eliminated.
Yeah.
Slaughtered. It's now like a bar,
really?
nightclub. Yeah, next to there's like a little nightclub that's called Perro Negro.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had this.
Oh wow! Like that's like right in the mix of everything.
So yeah.
But yeah, you would have had to hold on to it all that.
I would have had to hold on to it. Too much uncertainty. It was only kind of like breaking even before then. We were thinking about refitting it because it was 6 individual units.
Yeah.
So we were going to convert it to like a large group house.
Okay.
Put a pool in the back, things that would attract a certain audience here. And that would have made more money than the individual apartment rate.
Yeah.
But the uncertainty was, when are they opening this country again?
Yeah.
And how long am I going to carry my lease and the expenses here? So I was just like, you know what? I'll surrender my insurance deposit and sell out the furniture and whatever, call it quits. And it was probably like a solid year before things started to open back up to tourists. So I'm not sure if it was a good decision to exit, but that's what it was.
Yeah.
So what in particular about that hotel deal made you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to take the chance here? Because I think for a lot of other people who don't invest in businesses regularly or any asset class, that would be a pretty scary thing. But since you've already been investing in businesses, real estate, et cetera, I guess it wasn't as difficult. But what was your thought pattern in making that commitment? Was it, if I do this, I get my migrant visa, or the economics of this deal made sense?
Yeah, the visa was definitely just a bonus.
Okay.
That was just a bonus in the process, which is, I'm glad, because I have some other folks where they are here full time and they were in that deal, and a big part of it was the visa. And now Colombia has made it difficult, if not impossible, to get that visa anymore. And so as they're figuring out some political things. But so for me, it was just the deal itself. You just looking at the comps was a big part of it. So we could see, like here were the other hotels that are in the area. Here's their occupancy. You just bought back into, based on their occupancy, what they're generating and all that. And so that it was comp based, and location based. It's just a really great location. There was nothing else close by that was available for sales. So another, you're really looking at two things for me in any business. It's like, all right, what, how much money has it been generating? In that case, we didn't have that. So you got to look at the comps. And then what's the competition like? And how much more competition can come?
How much can the market tolerate before saturation's hit?
Yeah.
So, okay. Because I've been thinking about getting back into the space, either doing like that kind of group setting or even doing like kind of tiny cabins in Guatapé.
Yeah.
Like one of those two. So I'll probably be covering that on the channel over time to kind of
it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, gauge interest, gauge what's happening out there. Because every time, like I go back and forth to Florida, I swear to you, every time that I come back, I see a new crane set up somewhere, putting up a building. Either it's an apartment building or it's a hotel.
Yep.
Like there's like 3 right here that are being built. There's another one that just got completed up the block. There's one right next door to me that's getting built. I think that's going to be an apartment building. And I feel like I'm kind of missing out. And with exchange rates the way that they are now, it's kind of in the US dollar's interest to be making these investments. So I'm looking at all these things and trying to piece together the right sort of deal that not only I can invest in, but viewers of the channel can invest in.
Yeah. People
who are interested in potentially getting a migrant visa. I got my visa approved maybe 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay. Which one?
A migrant class visa for 3 years.
Was it based on, it's not the rentista?
I wouldn't know. I don't even know what it's called. But what I had to do like about almost $30,000, invested, form a corporation here, invest in that corporation, and employ people. So I have my staff here.
Gotcha.
And it was only supposed to be like a 1-year approval, but during the interview process, they were like, "Oh, have you started operations yet?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'm already operational." They're like, "How many employees do you have?" And I think I had 8 at the time. And they're like, "Are you providing insurance coverage?" And I was like, "Yeah." There's a few of them who have taken the insurance contracts, and others who are just kind of on the other contract that they have here.
Gotcha.
Came back. I was like, "All right, pay the fee. 3 years approved."
That's awesome.
That's it. And then like the attorney that I worked with was like, "They gave you 3 years," and I was like, "Yeah, they gave me 3 years." He's like, "Nah." He's like, "That's usually
rare.
Not what
especially
happens."
Right now, they're getting very tight.
And I think what the key there was that we were employing people, paying into the tax pool, paying into the insurance pool, rather than, "Hey, I'm just investing in this thing. I'm the only employee. And that's it."
Yeah.
I think what they really want to see is the creation of jobs here for Colombians. So for anybody who is thinking about investing, you need to be able to show that paper trail of people are working, it's Colombians, it's legal people who are working here, and that you're contributing to their economy more so than just kind of.
Which is the same. So even for the hotel, before that was like, that's what we were saying. It's like, hey, we've got, 60 employees, we got construction, we got spa, we got a restaurant in there. So we have all of that. But now I think they're really focused on the small business. So they like the small business more than just, okay, here are these 20 guys that, own 5% a piece of this big project. And so that's been the thing that is an interesting shift and good to know, because there are a lot of folks that, as that has come, because people really didn't know as it was happening. And so a lot of people that were still making those investments, like, oh yeah, the attorneys were like, oh yeah, this is always approved. It's like, oh, this is weird, it's denied. And then, I was just going to do a renewal just because, and mine was denied as well. And so I have friends that had a whole life here that have left because their investor visa was
getting
denied.
kicked back. Man, that sucks.
Yeah.
I guess, but the alternative would be the visa where you purchase real estate. Like the $150,000 purchase, and then that actually fast tracks you to citizenship as well, which I guess is a cool bonus if you're thinking about living here.
Yeah.
Common question that people ask when they're leaving the United States: how is it that you could afford to live internationally? Most people are so fixed to that mindset of being attached to the job. What if the job can't be taken remotely? What do you do? Obviously, you're an entrepreneur, you own businesses, you're generating money from that. What I want to talk about are kind of the ways that people can do that, and also what is it costing you to live your lifestyle and what that lifestyle is like. So I guess the very first question is, how do you go about affording your lifestyle internationally?
Yeah. So for me, I really like living on my investment income. I feel like the goal is to get to retirement as quickly as possible. Now, for me, retirement isn't I don't want to do anything, or I don't want to work, or I don't want to make more money. It's just I'm basically living off of investments. So I have a stock market portfolio where, not to get too complicated, but essentially I sell options. And so that's one form of income. Then I have a portfolio of businesses where we're not reinvesting, because most of the time with the businesses that I own, we're either doing one or two things. If we have excess cash flow, we're trying to reinvest in that business to grow it, because the goal is always to exit. Or we're looking to buy other businesses and grow through acquisition so that we eventually can have a bigger exit. And so it's every once in a while there's a business that has enough of that where I'm taking out a income. So those two end up being the money that I actually live off of, and just get to do little projects and things like that. That I want to play around with when it comes to business. Because for me, that's one other thing. Is I realized that I do enjoy business. I had that period earlier in my life where I just got overwhelmed and just took on too much. But I enjoy playing around and tinkering with businesses for sure.
Okay. So the income is derived from some activity in the stock market. And then if there is excessive cash flow from the portfolio businesses that you own, where you're not siphoning money out the business and hurting it, you draw a salary from that as well. Yeah. Any other, I guess the investment from the hotel, since that pays off cash now,
yeah,
and that's kind of a standalone that kind of feeds your income. So stock market, real estate, and cash flow from existing businesses.
Yeah.
What would you say your month-to-month living expenses are here?
It's about, so because I have multiple places. So that's one of the tougher things is I would say my total expenses are about $6,000. But I have a place here and I have a place right now in CDMX in Mexico City. So that includes both of those. That includes, maybe a flight or two in between, and just living expenses and that kind of thing.
Why Mexico City?
I love Mexico City.
Food or just?
Definitely food. That would be one of my unfortunate things about Medellin is I enjoy international food. Mm-hmm. And, when it comes to Medellin, you can find some good paisa food, some good Colombian food. But once you get outside of the sweet spot, it becomes very tough to find, great Italian, great Mexican, all the other things that you want to enjoy.
And Mexico City is more of a world city.
And you've got everything, world-class Japanese, world-class Italian restaurants. So part of it is food and just being in a real city. So whether that's shows, museums, opera, just having a bunch of options of things to do. It's a much different lifestyle. I love coming here. Especially just when it's focused. I've got my, around where I live, my cafe that I love and they love me. We got a great relationship. I've got a few restaurants. I've got my friends. It's definitely a life kind of on easy mode, so I can focus on other things. In Mexico, I'm kind of getting
big
pulled.
City life.
Yeah, it's a big city life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting that you have it split that way. So around $6,000 a month. How do you think that compares to an equivalent lifestyle in the United States? So let's just say that you're splitting between a city like Charlotte, North Carolina, which I would say is kind of similar in size and kind of pace to Medellin, and being in New York.
Yeah. I mean, there's I'm in Mexico. I'm in an area called Polanco. Mm-hmm. They call it the Beverly Hills of Mexico, and it lives up to that. And so I don't even know in the city, maybe upper. What would be the equivalent of that?
I would say part? Upper East.
I was going to say Upper East side.
More hip would be meatpacking, down and Tribeca.
would be,
Yeah. So it's like that, Upper East Side, more old money, higher end money.
Yep, that's Polanco.
What would you think the cost difference would be?
And so like you couldn't get a decent place for $6,000. You know what I mean? Like the whole budget of like everything. We have in 2, places in 2 cities, housekeepers, just like there's
easily maybe 3 times as much.
Easily.
Yeah. Easily 3 times as much. Because then it's not only the housing expenses that vary.
What would it cost to even have a housekeeper on top of that?
Yeah, the housekeeper is going to cost you per cleaning is going to be about $100.
Yeah.
Right. So here you could probably get a full-time housekeeper for $400
a month.
Yeah. And come clean daily, hook you up with a couple meals.
Yeah. Run
errands for you. Go to the supermarket.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a completely different, and that's people kind of look at me like a cheapskate, but it's one of the things that I really enjoy about living internationally. The difference in price between the United States and most of the places that I consider calling home is substantial.
Yeah.
And the quality of life improves, right? Just like you said, you're pulling a Benjamin Button, you're aging in reverse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's because you're able to rest a little bit more. You're not kind of bogged down with maintenance of the home. You're not bogged down with trying to figure out what to eat. It's just a completely different lifestyle. That's a thing that really stuck out to me. I had my first experience with wanting to live internationally in Thailand as well. I went to Bangkok and Phuket.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I was in an environment that wasn't like dollarized for vacation. Because if you go to the Caribbean, everything's expensive. You go to Mexico, like Cancun area, that's your first traveling scene. Everything's going to be priced like the United States or even more in some cases. So going to Thailand that's not dollarized, get your pad thai for 40 baht. I'm like, what is going on here? It's like, wait, looking at the cost of real estate, the cost of suits, the cost of just living in general. I was like, for, about $1,000 a month, I could live the same lifestyle that's costing me $5,000 a month in New York.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I think I would live here. Because I hadn't been to another place that wasn't like a resort town before that. Yeah. So everything I knew was resort town and getting exploited.
Yeah.
And not necessarily really seeing a city that functions as a city with public transportation, with all the amenities that you'd expect.
The
real cost. And I was like, man, I think I'm onto something here. It's like if I could just reorganize my life so that I could live in these places, I could do so for substantially less money, not necessarily be under the same pressure to earn and live the equivalent lifestyle. That was what it was for me. I was just like, man. So then every single place that I traveled to from that point on, it was the analysis of how much would it cost me to live here? What does an actual 2-bedroom apartment cost? How much is the minimum wage? How much is help? What is the visa? What does a plate of food cost? Every single place, I kind of go through that same analysis. And, by far, Medellin, I think, is pretty affordable. You get some pretty nice things out of it. Mexico City, the same sort of things. Probably a little more expensive.
It's more expensive,
a little more expensive just because density of people, but you still have major arbitrage there.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So for someone who is just beginning their journey of, hey, I'm thinking about living internationally, what would you advise them to do to support their life in a country like Medellin or in a city like Medellin, I would say?
So, the first thing is like looking at what you're doing right now. So whatever you're doing right now in the U.S., I think trying to figure out how to do it from another place is the first goal, even if you got to make less money. And, I would say, like, how much are you spending here a month?
I think for my housing and like just basic living expenses is probably about $800, $900 a month.
Yeah. Because I think that's the important thing. Is like, even for me, I think Medellin, that portion of the 6 is probably closer to 2. With every housing, the housekeeper, just food, everything, about 2,000. So I think that's one of the things that's important. Is I think some people get used to I need to make more. But if you can have location independence, that is the time to just say, hey, I'm willing to take less if you'll give me that freedom. They're just all of these little things, and what you're going to have is a lot more free time to be able to take on another project. You mentioned, I don't have to think about what to eat. And, with all of these little decisions, it's taking up what I call kind of more psychic RAM than people realize. So the simple part of that is I don't have to worry about what to eat. But there's other things that go into that. You're like, oh, like I'm gonna make this meal today. And then you go to the fridge, you're like, oh no, I can't. I forgot. I'm out of this sauce. I've got to figure out something else. Or I run to the store and get this sauce. And then you just losing time. And then you multiply that with cleaning. And I don't have, just like all of these things that you're having to do in your life right now. And now there's this arbitrage where I don't have to think about it.
And what is that time worth to you? Like, that's something that I always measure. It's like, all right, based on my earning potential, what I generate in revenue per year, what does that break down to per an hour? And is this worth an hour of my time? Right? What is the true value of this if it's for work specifically? It's like, is this a task that I enjoy doing, or is this a task that I have to do? Then it gets priced to my hourly earning rate, right? Yep. So I recommend people do that too and say, hey, if you got 2 hours of your time back per day, what would that be worth to you?
Exactly.
Right?
And that's where you make up the difference. Yeah. It's like, hey, I'll take less money. Now, we were talking about this before we start recording. Now, the other thing, I wouldn't plan to come to another country and try to make money there. I think the real goal is arbitrage. So you can make less money in the US and then travel and then take advantage of the arbitrage. I would plan to come to Colombia and, I'm just going to get a job there and do the same thing. So what I'm saying is do the same thing that you're doing, but if you're in a job that doesn't have remote work, now that's becoming more standard. And so I would start to negotiate that and understand that, just as you explained, there's an arbitrage that's going to happen. There's time that you're going to get back. You basically will effectively make that difference back when you get down here.
Yeah, one thing I started to do was employ expats.
Yeah.
Right? So I even started putting out ads for that. So if you are interested in, let's just say you have a job that you can't port because they just won't support the remote work, et cetera, I'm starting to hire native English-speaking Americans who are interested in living here, paying them a wage that will allow them to live the lifestyle that you're describing. And it helps me because from an outside or outbound sales perspective, Americans like to hear American voices, right? So if it's a Filipino accent, a Spanish-speaking accent, it's automatically almost dismissed.
Yep.
So by having just that familiar tone helps me. So that's something that I've been offering as far as employment here.
Yeah.
But I had a nurse who contacted me and it was like, can I get a nursing job here? It's like you can make more as a nurse in one shift than these nurses make in a month.
Yep.
So no.
But I love your idea of, the cool thing is now with traveling nurses, you can take on jobs for 3 months and have enough in the US and have enough to live the rest of the year just
in about 65% of the world, right? Because I would say in pretty much all of South America, you could do 2,000 a month. Like Argentina, you could do 2,000 a month.
Definitely.
Brazil, you could do 2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Chile probably is a little higher market, but from Panama down, for sure. Mexico, in most places, 2,000 a month cuts it.
So in Mexico, the key is outside of the tourist areas. Because like I said, I'm in the Beverly Hills of Mexico, but it's still cheaper than Cancun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So staying away from those or Tulum or that kind of thing. So I'm paying less, and honestly, I think it's a lot better.
Yeah, awesome. So for you right now, in your life, you help people get into the private equity space.
Yeah.
Right? Can we just walk through what a typical deal looks like? And I kind of want to skew it to the perspective of someone, like if it was like a healthcare deal. I know we spoke about a healthcare deal before, but what goes into buying a business and how should someone kind of think about it if they're getting into buying businesses for the first time?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I talk more about private equity than acquisitions is I think there are a lot more potential to even like when we talk about the hotel deal. For most people, they really want equity in a business. They don't want the headaches of acquisition. That was one of my big transitions. So after I owned those businesses and had all the headaches and everything kind of fell back to me, the buck stops here, which sounds cool, but it's a bunch of work that's involved with that. And so one of my transitions was like, okay, I want to get the income from these businesses without having all of the headache. And so that meant, not having all of the equity. So now, instead of talking about acquisitions as far as like just go out and buy the business, the real goal is buying equity. And the reason that private equity is so much more valuable than public equity is the multiple that you're able to buy it at. You have companies that are traded
50 times.
50 times, 60 times their actual income. Yeah. And we're buying businesses that are like 2, max 3 times their annual income. And so when you're making an investment and stuff like that, you're able to take distributions and get income from that business that's at a much higher level. And you can also get into structuring those deals and that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the first things is, when it comes to buying those businesses, I like to be clear that most of the time we're not buying the business. We're buying some equity in that business. Gotcha. With some terms around, all right, here's the distribution we expect, here are the dividends, and that kind of thing. And
what would you say is the amount needed? Like if somebody was thinking, watching this interview saying, okay, I want to live this life. I want to be able to buy into companies that can spin off some cash flow for me. I don't want to be the operator because I may not have the skill set. I don't have the skill set to run a home healthcare agency. What amount of money would somebody need to even be able to earn that $2,000 a month and buy a minority stake in a company? What do you think the starting point is?
Yeah, so I'll give an example of a recent deal that we did. So we did a deal on a animation studio. And in that business, it's a business that nets low 6 figures. But the owner of it didn't mind keeping their ownership or some ownership, as well as some other investors, but they just didn't want to run the business anymore. And so a client and I end up buying that business. My client's going to run the business. We didn't, acquire the whole business. We put up about $15,000 in buying the equity. So we bought a percentage equity, but we're also getting a management fee for running that business. And so that really was the case. And one of the things, and so we also got control. We bought control of that business. And one of the neat things that was kind of interesting about that is there's about $70,000 in free money. Cash. Well, just in actual value, in cash in the bank that we then really controlled. Where, it's like, hey, we had control of that 70 grand. So we literally spent 15,000 and controlled 70 while we also got the equity and the management fee. And so the thing that I think people want to be aware of right now is there's just baby boomers that have to sell their business. If you start to do some research, you'll see there are a lot of articles about it. Just there are all these baby boomers that are obviously retiring. A big percentage of those own businesses and they've got to exit. They got to get out of the business. They're at some point, there's only 3 things that can happen with a business. The person passes away and so they're forced to pass it down. They sell it to somebody else or it goes out of business. And just kids do not want a lot of these businesses that are owned a lot of times by their parents. And if you think about it, even like somebody was like, why wouldn't a kid want a profitable business? Like if you grew up around a business your whole life,
it's annoying.
You want to do something else. It's time for something else. And so a lot of those baby boomers end up really being motivated sellers. We were talking about this a little bit before we got started, but our goal is to find we don't really care what the business is. I've done everything from tanning salons, which, I had never been. The first time I ever walked into a tanning salon, I walked out the owner. Yeah. I've done things like, we're talking about a property management deal that we just did today, all the way to an animation studio. Okay. So these are very extreme, very different things. And the PR firm is one of the deals that I'm hoping to close soon. So you can get a sense that these are just different types of business. And the reason that they vary so much is the number one thing for us is we're looking for a motivated seller, because we can't get the kind of deal that we want to structure if they're not motivated. And so the truth, like what you said, if somebody's willing to do the work to find a motivated seller, $10,000-$15,000, you can end up with not only a couple thousand or more than a couple thousand a month, but control of a lot of money as well.
Gotcha. So if somebody wanted to kind of learn from you, work with you, what would be the place, where would they start to actually apply your strategy to live the same lifestyle that you live in?
Yeah, so, I've got a lot of free stuff that's out there. So if you search Ace Chapman, the YouTube, I've done just a lot of free trainings. The second place would be a book I wrote, The Ace Formula. And then, just like low cost, we do have some hiring, kind of one-on-one coaching and that kind of thing. But the most inexpensive thing is the Patreon. So it's $25 a month, and there's over 200 training videos in there. So it's probably the biggest value in the space as far as getting a ton of information that's real life stuff for a pretty cheap cost.
And if somebody had a deal that they wanted to bring to you, say that they're in a situation where they want to sell a business, how would they do that?
Oh yeah. If you want to sell a business, be sure to reach out. I don't want to miss it. So be sure to send it to my assistant, Nori, at financierbank.com.
Yeah, I got that email address. So I'll
plug it down below. Yeah.
Kind of flash.
I don't want that to end up in my spam box, whatever. You want looking to sell a business, make sure you hear her. She's checking everything every day, so I won't miss it.
Right. And just to close out, this lifestyle of living globally, an American who decides to pick up and start living anywhere else in the world, who is it really for? What are the characteristics of that person?
I think somebody who, I don't think it's for everybody. So that's the first thing that I will say. I have so many friends that, it was their dream. Like, my dream is the American dream. And they're passionate about, having the white picket fence, living in suburbia, living that life. And so I think it's the person that when they look at that, they're like, hey, I'm going through the motions. And I think there are a lot of those people. They realize that they're just doing the things because everybody said that that's the thing that you're supposed to do. And so for those people, whether it's this or some other lifestyle, those are people that I would encourage to just start testing, get out of the comfort zone. And I think that traveling to another country is one of the best places to just start from zero and be able to figure out, what do I want my lifestyle to look like, and designing it without a lot of that input from the Matrix, as they say.
Perfect. I was just going to end it like that.
Perfect, man.
Cool, man. Definitely appreciate it.
Awesome.